In 1977, pre-code comedy legend Mae West decided once again to star in a film she had written herself. Based on a play she had written over a decade earlier, she starred as a Hollywood starlet with a string of eccentric ex-husbands, who seduces world diplomats for Uncle Sam. She was 84 years old. So, can the screwball sex magnet routine work for someone her age? Hello and welcome to Enchanted Essays. I post new reviews and video essays every Friday, so feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today I'm going to review Mae West's final film, Sextet. I feel like I have to mention it as a disclaimer that this is the first Mae West film I have seen, but I am certainly planning on correcting that. I am familiar with who she is, and I've seen plenty of clips of her in her heyday. But the main reasons I chose to review this is because it stars a Bond actor, 3 classic rock stars cameo in it, and it's a weird, obscure movie. I have very mixed feelings about both the film itself and the gender politics surrounding it, but I'll start with the movie itself. In this film, West's starlet Marlo Manners is in a hotel in London on her wedding night to her 6th husband, Sir Michael Barrington, played by a pre-Bond 31-year-old Timothy Dalton. I think that, for someone her age, Mae West is great. I honestly can't imagine another woman her age doing provocative as well as she does. Probably not great, but good for someone aged 84. I think she's rather one note compared to other performances of hers that I've seen. However, she was fed her lines through an earpiece, but the reasons why varied in accounts drastically. From her poor hearing to poor memory to the director rewriting her lines at short notice. Timothy Dalton is really good in this. He pulls off the role rather well, and we see his frustration grow throughout. Although he's known in the Bond community for not pulling off the jovial side of Bond, he really knows the assignment here, especially in the scenes where he's being interviewed. However, there's little chemistry between the two. West's performance gives off little romantic interest in her lord, whilst Dalton doesn't really give off that much sexual interest in her. Although his character is quite stiff in a stereotypically British kind of way, he just seems annoyed rather than sexually frustrated that he can't be alone with his wife. Meanwhile, this is supposed to be the man that Marlo feels differently about from all of her ex-husbands. But she purrs her lines to them so indiscriminately. This is also the final film of Keith Moon, the Who's drummer and occasional actor, who has a small role as a very camp fashion designer. It's the reason that I discovered this film in the first place. He has 3 minutes of scenery chewing, and it's the hammiest thing ever, but I absolutely love it. I must have seen this clip about 10 times already. In terms of the rest of the supporting cast, there's her long-suffering manager Dan, played by Dom DeLuise, who just skirts the edge of being annoying for me. He's good in some scenes. It's the kind of performance where I'm thinking, I'd like to find out what good movies there are with this person. Tony Curtis is alright as Marlo's impulsive Russian ex-husband. Ringo is there. Doesn't make much of an impression really. Alice Cooper's appearance is only really notable for how unlike Alice he looks in this movie, in a fancy bellboy uniform with a fro singing disco, although this was the same year that he experimented with a new alter ego with the album Lace and Whiskey. He does a straight disco number on that album. I highly recommend it. This film is also a jukebox musical. The songs fit the plot terribly. With a jukebox musical, you either have to choose songs around the plot or choose the plot around the songs. This film clearly chose to do neither. Apart from Tim singing Love Will Keep Us Together, the songs at best tell us nothing about the characters, and at worst tell us the exact opposite thing about them. They're all pretty forgettable, which is not something I should be saying when there is a Beatles song in this movie. It just makes the film drag. I'd be less surprised if this was a film from the 1930s, but both stage musicals and movie musicals had been around for a long time at that point, so they were less random by then. Considering some weren't even written when the play came out, I wouldn't be surprised if the musical numbers were exclusive to this film, making them even more unnecessary. I think this film would be far better without them. As for the comedy writing, there's some great puns, but they can't help but feel like they're from another era. I love innuendo, and I really miss it in modern comedy. I like having to think a little to get a laugh, but I think I would have enjoyed it more if it was a film from the 30s. Then there would be a sense of shock at what they could get away with. But this was the 70s. I can't help but wish Mae pushed the boundaries a little more in this era outside of her age. After all, this was the woman who was sent to prison for writing a play about prostitutes called Sex in the 1920s. I can't help but wonder how she could have pushed the boundaries further, especially because I know some of her one-liners here are recycled from her older pictures. So yes, I did like quite a few puns in this movie, but I like puns and innuendos. I'm a Roger Moore fan. I know lots of people will find them grating. As for the plot, it's a total mess. I can't help but feel like there were two concepts for farces happening at the same time. The starlet whose wedding night keeps getting interfered by her ex-husbands, and the starlet who sleeps with diplomats for the United States government, whose memoirs threaten national security. The conflict of the third act comes completely out of nowhere, despite being easy enough to set up with a line or two, along with a plot twist that also comes from nothing, with no consequences. I wouldn't mind such a silly plot if there was less of it. Whilst I did like her sparkly dresses, I think that the wedding suit and Marilyn Monroe hairdo she wore in the screen test suit her far better. I can only imagine that this retro look would draw attention to May's age, but it makes her look younger in my opinion. As for the feminist side of this movie, yes, it's great that Mae West made a film like this in spite of her age. But the fact that no one mentions her age, or her age gap with Tim, seems off, like the film and its star are in denial. Take the Golden Girls. That smashed a lot of taboo subjects at the time, most notably being the ages of the characters, all of whom have active unmarried sex lives. But they never shy away from the age of the characters when they do so. They are upfront about it, and it's part of what makes these characters so memorable. It certainly didn't need to be the focus of the film, but I think that they should have at least mentioned that Dalton is younger than her. So yes, good for her, I'm glad she made this movie, I'm glad it exists, but if you want to watch something that breaks taboos about older women and sex that is actually entertaining, watch The Golden Girls instead. All in all, I would say this film is probably not worth your time. There are a few fun moments that I liked, but I certainly don't think it's worth sitting through the whole thing. It's probably an interesting thing to watch if you're a big Mae West fan, but it's certainly not something to start with if you want to watch her work. It might be an interesting thing for big Timothy Dalton fans too. It probably does have some so bad it's good value in the mood for that. All in all, if you do watch this, it's probably good drinking game viewing, so let me know if you've thought up some rules in the comments. Have you seen Sextet? What Mae West film should I watch next? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. I post new video essays every Friday, so consider subscribing if you like that sort of thing. If you want me to make more content like this, you can let me know by liking the video. If you feel like buying me a coffee, you can tip me on Ko-fi. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to watch a review of a more watchable and certainly more bonkers comedy with Ringo in it, then I recommend watching my review of The Magic Christian. See you soon!
On the whole, I prefer the bagpipes.